Hello and welcome to the recording of the Partners 2020 Ask the Experts industry session for economics. This session was hosted by our careers consultant for the undergraduate programmes in the Newcastle University Business School, Jo Craggs, and she's joined by our guest, alumni James Wright. Has gone on to have a successful career spanning different departments and different projects within the civil service and particularly the Treasury. First of all, James is going to take you through a presentation to tell you a little bit more about his background, his time at university and his career to date. Jo will then be leading him in a few questions that have been submitted prior from you, the partner students. Without further ado, we'll hand over to James to tell you a little bit more.
So it's a real pleasure to be with you today, and thank you to Newcastle for inviting me, and to Case and Jo for arranging the session today. So I'm just going to start by taking you through what we're going to cover today. So very briefly, I'll give you a bit of background about myself, like Jo said, my time at Newcastle and what I've done since. I'll give you a bit about my current role, which is particularly interesting, and we'll give you a bit of a flavour about what jobs in the civil service can look like. And then I'm quite keen to give you a little sense of, in a few years when you go out to become economists or related careers, what might be next in terms of the big challenges that you could be working on. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about the routes into the civil service and the potential ways you could either take internships or graduate programs with us. So starting with my background, so I was at Newcastle between 2013 and 2016. I studied the economics BSc. And a real kind of inspiration for me in studying economics was obviously this was just after the financial crisis. Economics was very much in the public eye, and it had a huge role in how we're going to solve those global economic problems we were facing back then. And obviously that resonates very much today. So I had a fantastic time academically. I really enjoyed, in particular, my dissertation, which I did on the link between income inequality and health inequality in former communist countries. So I would really recommend doing a dissertation when you get to that stage, and happy to talk about that later. But then also Newcastle is such a fantastic both university and city for taking advantage of so many other things. So obviously some of these are going to be more difficult at the moment because of coronavirus, but I know the university is making alternative arrangements for some things, and of course some things are slowly returning back to normal. So just a couple of things I'd mention from Newcastle is my internship with the Reserve Bank of India that I did after my second year working and living in Pune, which is a city in India, for 2 months, and then doing some traveling afterwards. So, an absolutely unique thing that I had on my CV and I could talk about in interviews. And I'm sure Jo would agree with this, that a really useful thing to be able to do in interviews is to just catch someone's attention, because they get really, really bored of interviewing sometimes. And if you can give them something different and interesting, it's really, really helpful. And then a couple of other things. So these will be affected by coronavirus, but the NCL Plus Award, which is, I think, still going on, and Jobs on Campus, both things you can do that give you excellent experience, help you stand out in interviews, and in the case of Jobs on Campus, obviously give you money as well. So it's a kind of win-win situation. So after I left Newcastle, I was firstly considering studying a master's. So I had a place to do international economic policy at Sciences Po in Paris. Unfortunately, I couldn't secure the funding. There was a second year at LSE, and some of you might go on to discover the cost of masters at LSE. So the really important part for me was the international experience, which is why I went for that. But I'll just quickly add that there are plenty of universities in the UK that will, especially for domestic students, so very keen to have you and will give you full scholarships. So please don't let that put you off. But I instead entered a law firm very briefly, working on HR data administration. So, not something I thought I was going to end up doing, but definitely not relevant to what I was going to go on to do in my later career. But that kind of experience, working in a professional setting, actually being able to engage with people in that way, is still really, really useful experience. So I just mentioned that because, wherever your career might go, don't discount anything as being, potentially the next step to where you do really want to be. And then, so finally, late 2016, I entered the Treasury, and it was through a non-traditional route, not the graduate development program that the Treasury runs, but I'll talk about both later on. I will just run you through some of the roles I've had in the Treasury. So my first role, this was late 2016, immediately after the EU referendum, and I came in working specifically as an assistant economist on the analysis of the impact of leaving the EU. So this was very, very foremost in the public attention at the time, and it was very important for the public in understanding the decision that was being made. So this included analysis of major sectors of the economy, kind of from manufacturing to the financial services to farming and fishing. And my specific focus was foreign direct investment. So a really important area for the country. We're a very open economy, and understanding what impact Brexit could have on that. And I also kind of developed a role for myself in managing the many, many requests we were seeing back in 2016, 2017 for the release of this analysis, which we managed quite smoothly for a while until one day I had the moment every civil servant dreads when you turn on the radio and it's about your work and it's been leaked to BuzzFeed of all news publications. There was some fascinating work kind of handling the fallout from that. But a core part of my role was the economics that I'd gone into the role to begin with. So my next role after doing that for 18 months was working on public sector productivity. So this was completely different. This was moving to looking at the money the government spends. And some of you will be familiar with Paul Krugman, who said productivity isn't everything, but in the long run, it's almost everything. So he was talking about countries as a whole, but the kind of core message of that is if you want to have growth in the long run, if you want people's living standards to keep getting better, you need productivity growth, and you'll cover this in some of your modules in your degree. But it's the same for public services. If we can't keep putting more money in, but we know demand on public services are going to grow, especially, this was in a world before coronavirus, but especially looking at a kind of aging population, we know we're going to need to be getting more from public services. And the graph there kind of shows you the difficulties of this. So those two lines climbing very closely with each other are the inputs we put into public services. So all the money we spend, all our nurses, doctors, teachers, and the output is the kind of index of services provided, and that's across everything the government does. So as you can see, it's very, very hard to keep those apart because a lot of what you put in, you get to direct services out, and public service productivity is a really tricky issue. So you can see productivity there as a flat line, basically. So a really difficult problem, bringing a lot of economics in, but also bringing a lot of actual policy formulation to it as well. And so I did 18 months on that as well, and then moved to my current role, which is working as a policy analyst on anti-money laundering policy and international technical assistance. So perhaps my longest job title yet, but also I think my most exciting. So some of you might recognize that picture, which is taken from Casino Royale. So I'm officially in the team that Vesper Lind from Casino Royale was supposed to be, which is about as exciting as it gets in the Treasury. So what do? We attend the Financial Action Task Force meetings, which meet 3 times a year, either in Paris or in the country of whichever country is president at the time. And the FATF, as it's known, is the international standard setter for anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing. So I'm sure you're aware that anti-money laundering or money laundering itself is a huge role in criminality across the world. So anything ranging from drug dealers to corrupt politicians who embezzle billions of pounds from their country, they all need to hide the origin of that money somewhere if they want to spend it. And there's a huge range of ways to do that. And the Financial Action Task Force is kind of the first line in saying this is how we're going to stop it happening. So it's a very technical area, and can feel quite separated from most Treasury work. So I have far less engagement with our ministers than I used to. But it's also, both a very important role, but quite an exciting role. So it brings with it a lot of international travel, which is, something a lot of people do aim for. And I've got to attend some, very exciting, glamorous meetings, drinks receptions with the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago in Port of Spain in the Caribbean. It springs to mind immediately. So it can sound a lot like jesting about, but as I say, it is a very important area, and there's a lot of responsibility that comes with it. And there's huge implications both for the UK and for all these countries internationally that we're working with. So obviously, given its nature, it's really difficult to know the scale of money laundering internationally. But as an example, there's estimated to be about $12 trillion held by shell companies around the world. So some of this might be legitimate money, but it is a huge, huge amount of money that will be the proceeds of criminality. And some of you might have heard of the Panama Papers, which also kind of helped to bring light to the huge scale of money laundering on a global basis. So it's a really interesting, exciting area, and I'll stop there, but very happy to talk about it more if anyone's got any questions. And so now I'll go on to talking about what's next for economists and what you could be looking at working on in a few years' time. So I think I will start here by saying that these are obviously my personal views. They're all based on publicly available information, and please don't take them as the views of the Treasury or any indication of future policy. But first, on the left here, we've got the graph showing the impact that COVID-19 and the lockdown are having on the economy. So a really, really significant hit, completely unprecedented. If you think back to the 2008 recession, that was nothing as severe. And I think, this has got the potential to be the most significant financial crisis we've faced in centuries, if not ever. So there's a huge amount of work that's been going on in the Treasury, to find the immediate impacts of this. But now we need to start thinking about how do we protect the UK against the lasting effects of the lockdown, and also how do we rebuild where the economy has been so badly impacted. So the Chancellor has just finished the summer economic update. Hopefully some of you saw that. And he was announcing the first measures of that programme. So we're moving from protection to jobs to rebuilding. We're in the rebuilding phase now. So there's huge questions here. Which industries and businesses do we support? Which ones don't get support? And there are significant concerns about long-term scarring on the economy. So the Chancellor's just announced a kickstart scheme, which is aimed at young people and getting them into employment. And so that's based on evidence that early employment is incredibly important for your future career prospects. So people who are unemployed early in life face significant lasting impacts to their later career. So that's a really good example of evidence-based policy, which is formulated to tackle a particular problem. So, and the key point is this is something the Treasury is going to be working on for years and decades, and will have impacts, and possibly something all of you can come to work on. And then the second picture there, some of you will recognise Mark Carney, who since stepping down as the Bank of England governor has been advising the British government on climate finance. So economics has always been a lens through which to view climate change. It's always been the classic externality problem. Individuals and firms don't recognise the full cost of their emissions, and that's a big part of why we have climate change. But it is a hugely complex issue. There's a whole host of problems and policies that we don't have time to go into. But there is this increasing recognition that the finance sector in particular has, and the role they have to play in better understanding and accounting the risks of climate change, and making sure they support opportunities for the transition to a net zero economy. So Mark Carney is going to be leading on that work, and COP26, which is the climate change conference, which has been delayed, but will be playing a huge role there as well. So these kinds of challenges that I've just been talking about can feel quite intimidating, quite overwhelming. They need huge cooperation across pretty much every country in the world. But as economists, we are in a position to work with others to find those solutions, to understand the problems and think about what we're going to do about them. So I could definitely talk about these all day, but I will stop there, and we can obviously come back to them if you've got any questions. So now I wanted to talk about hopefully that all sounds really interesting and you're very keen when you get your degrees to come to the Treasury and civil service. So I'll say very quickly that we are the largest employer of economists in the country across the Government Economics Service, which provides economists to pretty much every department. And within that, the Treasury, because it's quite a small department, recruits between 60 and 100 graduates every year. So you can come into the civil service in lots of different ways. So there is the policy advisor recruitment scheme for the Treasury. It's called the Graduate Development Programme, or the GDP, because someone's got a great sense of humour. But there's also several civil service wide schemes for a range of professions. So you could be a generalist. You can, of course, specialise as an economist. Some people want to go and be diplomats in the Foreign Office. But you'll have plenty of time during your degree to decide what you want to focus on. And then finally, the civil service offers a range of internships or sandwich year options that you can take. And I will start by just going into some of those on the next slide. So firstly, we have the Summer Diversity Internship Programme. So that's when you're at university. There is a version after you've done your first year, but the main programme is after you've done your second year. So that is targeted at either BAME people or people from disadvantaged socioeconomic classes, and it offers you a fantastic chance to basically spend the summer in a team doing the job that you would hopefully be doing when you graduate. So you might be working on economic policy, you might be working on, coronavirus is going to be have implications for a whole range of government policy, so you could well be working on that. But you'll get to see what it's like up close and form a huge range of contacts within your department. And then if you decide you want to go on to work on the fast stream, there's something called the fast pass. So if you successfully complete your internship, you have the opportunity to move to a later stage of the fast stream application when you get there. There's also specifically for economists, so you're all in luck, there's the Government Economics Service Summer Internship. So as long as you've got 50% of your degree in economics, so it's fine if you're doing economics and marketing, for example, this is something you can do. So there you'll be working on proper economic policy, or perhaps the economic data releases that the Treasury does. And they're an excellent opportunity to really get into how the government goes about doing economic policy. So we've got a very stringent way of doing it, making sure it's fully evidence-based. And from my experience working with interns, you will get a fantastic opportunity to see the Treasury or any department that you're in up close, and put you in a fantastic position for applying for the fast stream. And similarly, if you don't just want to take the summer out, you want to take a whole year out, there's also a sandwich year option, which I know Newcastle really supports. And as I've been saying, all of these are cross-government, so you could be allocated to any department. Then moving on to the fast stream and the various graduate programs. So the Treasury, as I've said, has its specific graduate development program. So you don't apply through the fast stream, you'll apply to us directly. And although I came in as a direct hire, I did come onto this program for the training opportunities and to have a cohort of friends from across the department that I can then rely on as a network as I move through the Treasury. So you'll do 2 18-month rotations as a policy advisor. If you're an economist, you've got an economist background, you can also work as an assistant economist on that scheme. You can start in April or September, so a lot of people that come straight from university will start in September. But of course, we have plenty of people who come from other jobs or have taken a bit of a break, and they often start in April. So like I say, you get a cohort, and the training that you do with them helps form really strong bonds, and they provide a network that anytime you want to know about a bit of work in another part of the Treasury, you've got someone to reach out to. And deadlines for those applications are often early November, but you've got a bit of time, obviously, before you have to think about that. And then if you're not just interested in the Treasury, if you want to do policy in a specific department, there's the fast stream. So this is 3 years, and you'll often do 3 times 12 postings, 12-month postings. So you'll get options to try plenty of different things, often in different departments. And as I've said, there's a whole range of things you can do this in. So that lists generalist economics and finance schemes, which are some of the most common ones. particularly that the Treasury takes fast streamers from. But then there's also, like I said, the diplomacy stream if you're interested in doing more international work. And yeah, so the rotation between departments is often across different schemes. And then finally, like I said, you don't have to go through a scheme, especially if you want to go and do something else first, or you, a lot of people want to focus on their final year of university in their final year, so perhaps you don't want to apply for a graduate scheme. That's absolutely fine. So like I said, you can apply for the graduate scheme later on, but you can also look on the Civil Service Jobs website, which is linked there. You can filter it down to see which things you're really interested in, set up alerts. And like I said, this is how I came to the Treasury. So it is a common route in and lets you, especially if there's something you're really interested in, try and hone in on that. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say. So I hope that's been interesting. I hope that's been helpful. Like I said, thank you so much for inviting me and listening to me. And I am very happy to accept any questions. You've got my email there, and please do connect with me on LinkedIn if you've got any questions that you want to put to me on there. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, James. That's absolutely fantastic. Great insights there for you all. So I hope that's been really useful, really interesting information, and particularly useful for me as well, James, personally. So when I get grilled by students with specific questions, that's really, really helpful. Certainly on the range of internships and different routes into the civil service itself.
We now move on to our Q&A, where Joe has a series of questions that have been submitted prior to this session from you, the partner students.
A question came in largely about, I suppose, in terms of timescales. That seems to be a very common question that we get. So how long did it take you to get into your kind of first graduation role, the first one that you talked about, following your degree? So give us any more insight into your kind of timescales, please?
So I was just talking about, whether or not you want to use your final year to apply for graduate schemes. And among my group of friends, there was the complete range. There were some who didn't want to think about it, they wanted to focus on their degree, and there were some that must have applied for about 3 dozen different graduate schemes. So up to you, completely see how you feel in your final year. I, as I said, wanted to do a master's, so my focus was on applying there. So when I took the decision that I wasn't going to go ahead with that, that was probably in the summer of 2016, just after I graduated. And then I found this role at the law firm that I worked for briefly, I'd say about September. And I knew this was always going to be a kind of temporary stopgap job. I did really enjoy it, and I actually did consider staying, and I could have had a career working in HR, and I did really enjoy it. But I'd kept an eye out, and in particular, a friend recommended this job that she'd seen, and I think that's always a really useful thing. My friends knew I was very interested in working in government, so do talk about things like that, and people will point out opportunities available. So I applied for this. I think it was probably around the same time I started the job in the law firm. And then, so that would have been September, and I was in the job by early November 2016. So that's quite a quick process because it's a direct hire. They interview me, I get the job kind of thing. Graduate schemes obviously tend to have slightly longer timeframes. So like I said, the graduate development program, you'll normally apply kind of September, October, the year before you want to start. And then there's a range of processes you'll go through, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So you've got your application, then you've got psychometric questions. So these are kind of testing your numerical and literary reasoning quite normally. And then you would finally have an assessment centre, which is quite common across the fast streams, where you'll go often in a group and do a couple of exercises. So this could range from anything from writing a policy proposal, perhaps being questioned on what you think the solution to that policy is, and perhaps just a kind of straightforward face-to-face interview. So it completely depends on the scheme that you're applying for. And then you would go through those over the course of the year and be ready to start in September or October of the year that you finish your degree. But obviously all that bearing in mind, you can see why some people choose to wait until after their degree.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, James. That's really, really useful kind of insight, not just from your own experience, but obviously the graduate scheme routes as well. I was just thinking about that when you said that. I mean, from my perspective, obviously in the career service, we get quite a lot of students who might be a little bit kind of intimidated or a little bit kind of put off by that process of the assessment centre and, you know, all those different stages. Is there any advice you'd offer them? I know from my perspective, it's obviously encouragement all the way, but is there any specific could give our students to prepare for that route?
Yeah, no, it's a really, really good question. And, you know, interviews and assessment centres are quite scary things sometimes because, you know, you are being assessed, you know, they're looking at every part of you. So I think the one thing that I would try to do if possible is get kind of experience at doing it. So, you know, I've mentioned the jobs on campus, JobSoc. There's obviously an interview process to do that. There's plenty of chances, obviously, to get internships, jobs while you're studying. But so if you can, you know, go out and get experience in doing these interviews, having someone sit opposite you in a suit and tie and ask you quite difficult, probing questions, when it comes to the interview for the job you really want, you kind of find you're a lot more confident. You've done all this before. Often the answers to the questions are ones you've given before, so you're far happier in what you're going to say. And then the other piece of advice that I've found quite helpful is people say, you know, an interview is a two-way thing. So it might be a job you really want, but, you know, you're all going to go and work really hard. You're going to be fantastic candidates. So they want you as well. You know, the government is desperate for economists. I think anyone would tell you that. So as long as you can prove that you're an economist, you know what you're talking about, you've studied hard, they will want you to come and work for them. So it's about them demonstrating to you they're a good place to work just as much. And obviously that's part of why I'm here, trying to persuade you all to come and work with me. So if that helps you relax by thinking, you know, they're being interviewed as well, I'm interviewing them, then, you know, think of it that way.
I think that's a really, really good point, really, really important point to remember, isn't it? And it's got to be a two-way, as you said, two-way relationship, fit and so on. Yeah, absolutely. So essentially the preparation, the practice with, you know, the team like ourselves and that kind of thing would be your main advice in terms of preparation. And then, of course, you touched on, and on the other side of that is the importance of gaining that other work experience. So I think you've kind of answered the next question for me, but again, if I pose it to you and see if there's anything else you'd like to add, but how important would you say gaining relevant work experience is in trying to get that graduate position? What would you say the kind of the top takeaways of getting that extra direct work experience, do you think?
Yeah, no, it's a really, really good question. And I will very quickly say, so I worked a lot when I was at Newcastle with Karen Pearson, who I don't know if she's still there.
Yeah, she is, yeah.
Who, you know, I will never not find an opportunity to say how amazing she was. And again, so it's this kind of thing in terms of, like I say, talking to people about what you want to go and do, the opportunities you're looking for. And careers advisors like Karen, like yourself, you know, you have these contacts, you know what's out there. So yeah, definitely, please, all of you, go and talk to the careers service. And Newcastle, in terms of having business school specific careers consultants, is a really big advantage you should make use of. And yeah, in terms of work experience, so you know, like I've said, I know some of you want to focus on your degree, but I think work experience is hugely, hugely helpful, because when you're going to interviews, when you're going to assessment centres, you know, it's a graduate scheme, everyone's doing their degree. So you should, you know, definitely work really hard at that. Make sure you find parts of it that are really interesting and you can really focus on. But like I said, when I was talking about the Reserve Bank of India internship, you want things that help you stand out. So if you can go and do an internship through the Global Experience Opportunity, work in another country, work with students from another university in a different country, that's one way to do it. Having interesting jobs. So, I mean, you know, obviously nothing to do with any of the jobs I applied for. But when I was kind of 17, 18, I worked in a fishmonger's. And Karen kind of said, no, keep that on your CV because it's completely different. I've never seen that on a CV before. So, you know, things like that which just help you stand out. And, you know, so that can be jobs, but obviously lots of other things you can get involved in at university. So societies, you know, find a society and something you're really interested in. So I was fairly sure I didn't want to work in the finance sector. As I said, I wanted to come work in government, but I was the treasurer of the Newcastle University Finance Society, which I expect is still going. So, you know, that's a lot of engagement with professional firms. You know, I was in charge of sponsorship, so kind of going to them to try and get money, which, you know, is excellent preparation for coming and working in the Treasury. But, you know, it can be any society. If you're on the committee or if you play a really leading role, you are developing the kind of skills that are going to help you for when you're sitting in an interview or sitting in an assessment centre.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I think obviously you've touched on a really key point for me there, in that, you know, yes, I asked the question directly about the relevant work experience, but you immediately tapped into that whole range of different experiences. And yeah, from my perspective, we do come across quite a few students who assume that certain job roles won't be of any interest to an employer, you know, that relate to things like bar jobs. I haven't had another fishmonger yet, so that's something to... but yeah, so that's absolutely crucial, isn't it, to develop that full range of transferable skills that could come from a range of different involvement in terms of, you know, a range of different job roles, the society talked about.
Completely, yeah. So kind of thinking about the graduate development programme or the fast stream, you know, there are internships in government. You can, you know, go into an interview for the fast stream having experience of working in that department, and that's an advantage. But, you know, graduate schemes will not expect you to have experience of, you know, their particular industry. It helps, but if you can go in and say, you know, well, I haven't done this, but look at all these great transferable skills I've got, you know, especially if I can turn working in a fishmonger's into why it's really good experience for being an assistant economist in the Treasury, you know, that in itself is a transferable skill that shows them that, yeah, you should hire me.
Yeah, they'll not forget you either, will they? During that recruitment process, you'll definitely stand out. I suppose just more of a general question then. So bearing in mind everything you've said, if I was to kind of push you a little bit into what specifically, if you were to reflect on your experience at Newcastle University, what would be the main kind of takeaways that you would say in terms of how university just helped you get where you are or helped develop you as a person? What would your main takeaways from your uni experience be?
No, that's a really, really good question. So I kind of, when I got to Newcastle, so I didn't mention it in my background, but I had been at another university doing maths and physics beforehand, and absolutely hated it. So yeah, I mean, you know, loved it before, but came to the university and decided, no, not for me at all. So I took a year out, and then when I got to Newcastle, I was very, very keen that I was just going to completely throw myself into it. You know, I was far more confident I was going to enjoy economics, but just kind of throw myself into pretty much anything I could. So I think, you know, that kind of managing all these kind of extracurricular things on top of doing quite a demanding degree, you know, being able to balance multiple priorities is considered a really key skill at the Treasury, as in a lot of jobs. So, I mean, I definitely don't advise, you know, picking up too many things than you could manage, because I will say my second year in particular, you know, got quite stressful at times, and that's not a good road to go down. But things like, you know, you've got a student staff committee for your subject in the business school. So things like that, and working quite closely with the lecturers and staff on the business school is a very good preparation for the kind of world of work, and, you know, having to go and sit in professional meetings. And, you know, for some people that might sound awful, but you go and try it and you think, okay, no, these are actually really important issues that are going to affect me and, you know, kind of everyone else studying with me. So I think that is a really key thing. Kind of do look into doing other things, you know, find things you're interested in, societies, jobs, student staff committee, whatever. Find something you're interested in, give it some time, and you will develop those transferable skills. The other thing, especially that stands out for Newcastle for me, was just the kind of really strong bond you form with everyone. You know, Newcastle is one of the friendliest places I've ever been to. I absolutely loved living there, and that continues completely into the university. So, you know, you'll have a great time, you'll make loads of friends, but do talk about careers, you know, do talk about the things you want to go and do. Like I said, I got this job because one of my friends who did economics knew I wanted to work in government and just said, you know, have you seen this? Why don't you apply? So I think that kind of thing, like building up, you know, for want of a better word, a network of people who will, you know, be great friends while you're there. Seminars are so much more fun, you know, if you're doing them with your friends. You've done the work together. But then, you know, everyone's going to leave university and they're going to go into loads of different jobs. So even if you leave university, you're still not quite sure what you want to do. Perhaps you go and do something and think, oh, this isn't quite for me. You've now got loads of friends who are doing a kind of range of jobs. Obviously, if your friends are doing economics, a lot of them will be relevant to you too. So you can go and talk to them and find out lots of future opportunities that you can consider going forward.
Yeah, I noticed that actually throughout your presentation, that there was quite a few references to I suppose, the power and the importance of networking and developing those contacts. We've actually been, as kind of focused on the business school itself, we've run a series of Zoom webinars over the last, I think we're coming up to 10 weeks now. And quite a few times we keep coming back to this concept of networking and how important it can be. And in some of those sessions, we've had some students join the chats and kind of say, yeah, but how do I start? Or I'm not particularly one of those people that can just walk up to somebody and kind of make conversation, so on. Would there be any top tips you'd say for those kind of students who might be thinking, that's all great, but how do I get started? Might be any tips you could offer there?
Yeah, no, that is a really, really good question. So I'm definitely one of those people. I find it really hard to, you know, just walk up to someone. And at the moment, my current line manager is a kind of perfect example of someone who's really, really good at that. Someone who will just walk up to anyone and start a conversation, you know, start building that network and that relationship. So I think kind of the best advice I've got here, as someone who's not very good at that, is that very, very few people are. You know, my line manager is annoyingly good at it, but very few people enjoy going and talking to a complete stranger. But that means that they are really appreciative of people that do it, that do kind of take that first step. You know, that will go up to and say, you know, so what do you do? You know, how did you get into it? What do you enjoy about it? What are the difficulties? So, you know, be really brave. It's really hard, but be brave and go and take that first step. You know, I definitely attend a couple of networking specific events, particularly through the Finance Society I was talking about. You know, they're worth going just to, because networking is a skill. So it's something you need to practice. So go to these, you know, it's free food and drink sometimes, so why not? But go to these events and just take that first step and go up and talk to someone. And then once you're doing that, the kind of key thing I would say is, you know, appear interested. Even if, you know, you're not finding what they're saying interesting, you might later need that person as a bit of a contact. And people really, really like it when you're interested in what they're saying. So, you know, show you're interested in your face, ask lots of questions, and, you know, most people will then kind of respond in kind. They'll be interested in what you're doing. And then, you know, it can just be a kind of 5-minute conversation. You know, you're just asking what they're doing. But at the end of it, you could leave with their business card, their email address, whatever. And if you decide, actually, I want to find out a bit more about that, even things like, you know, going and shadowing them for a week or two. You know, lots of people will be very happy to do that. They're really flattered that you're interested in what they do. So, you know, don't be afraid to reach out to ask things like that after making kind of initial connections with people. Because the worst that can happen is they say no, and that's fine. You move on, you ask someone else. The only other thing I'd mention is, you know, you will have a sense, and if you don't, you might get one while studying, of where you want your career to be. But you don't necessarily know anyone doing that career. So I would just say, as I've said a couple of times already, talk to people about that. talk to the careers advisors and say, this is what I want to do. And, Newcastle's got a fantastic alumni network. And I really benefited from Karen setting me up with someone who was an alumni of Newcastle and were then quite senior in, I think it was Department of Work and Pensions at the time. So, just being able to talk to someone that does that job, they can give you advice on what the job is like, but then also specifically, how do you navigate an interview in that sector? Because, so for example, the civil service interviews will run a specific way. How do you answer these questions? What are some good things to say? And I mean, even, so that's a really good way to make contacts. But for the job, my first job in the Treasury, a conversation that really helped me was from talking to someone that had rejected me for a job about a month before. So this was an interview I did actually to be private secretary to Lord Adonis, who used to be the chair of the National Infrastructure Commission, which was, again, one of these random jobs. I decided I wasn't going to do my master's, and I saw it on civil service jobs and thought, well, that sounds quite fun, even if it is bag carrying for a lord. But I applied for that, went for interview, and when the hiring manager phoned me up, so sort of very sorry, I was the second choice, but there was someone that, just had lots of experience doing the right sort of thing. But she said, I think you're just right for working in the civil service, so please let me know if you've got any other jobs. So I dropped her an email after I got invited to interview for my first job in the Treasury, and she spent about an hour on the phone kind of giving me loads of tips, and she'd worked in the Treasury, so she could give lots of very specific advice. And it was so clear to me during the interview how helpful that was. And this was someone, I had one meeting with, but she was still willing to spend an hour pointing me in the right direction, helping me get a job. So there are lots of people out there who will really want to help you. They'll see potential in you. They are excited that you're interested in what they do and they love what they do. So just, reach out to people, whoever they are, and, look for people to help you do that, like the careers advisors.
Great. I think that's absolutely great. Obviously, just to mention it in terms of, like you said, when you talked to Karen Pearson a little while back, we have the NCL Spark mentoring platform. So that's another way for us now to kind of link our students up directly with our alumni and find who's, if you like, volunteering to help you out and kind of a warm lead. But the powers of just reaching out are, immense, aren't they? And people are generally nice and kind and understand your current situation. Probably particularly now, I think you might agree with that, given COVID-19, there might be even more of an empathetic kind of approach to a sounding board, I guess, to try and give you some pointers and some advice on how to navigate these current current difficulties and challenges.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think definitely just reach out, and I'd reiterate,
absolutely,
the worst that can happen is someone's going to say, I'm sorry, I'm too busy to give you any help right now. Yeah, and, you can try someone else. It's fine. Sure.
It's been really, really helpful, James. Thank you very much for your time. If I could finish on one last question, and throw this one at you. But if I was to then say, considering your time at the university and obviously your own career, what one piece of advice might you give or might you like to share with our partner students as a last comment, please?
Last piece of advice. I mean, it's a bit corny, but I think just really, really enjoy it. If I could swap places with you and go and do Newcastle all over again, I would. Enjoy it. Enjoy the subject. Economics is a fascinating subject. Talk to the lecturers. They obviously love it, and they're really happy when people show kind of specific attention to what they do. Talk to them, but then just get involved in kind of anything you can. Try things out. It's the same. I presume Freshers' Fair is going ahead in some kind of socially distanced way or on virtual way. Yes. But just go and try things out. Societies will love it if you just come and try them for one meeting or one session or whatever they are. If you don't like it, you've lost an hour or something of one of your days, and that's absolutely fine. Yeah. So yeah, just kind of absolutely dive in where you're, like we were talking about, it's the same as with networking. You're scared to go and say hello to people. just absolutely be as brave as you can be, and really try things out, because you will find things you absolutely love, and you'll get really good experience from it. And setbacks, I've had plenty. I was talked about hating my first year of university when I first tried it, but they can really be positive places to kind of build back from, so don't worry about those.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think that's brilliant advice, kind of having that resilience, isn't it, to bounce back, but throw yourself into it entirely would be your top tip. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, completely.
That is fantastic, James. Thank you so much for your time today, but really appreciate that, and some fantastic insights that I'm sure will help us all.
It's been absolutely great to join in. Thanks, Joe.
Brilliant. Thanks, James. Take care, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for tuning in to this recording of the Partners 2020 Ask the Expert session. We hope you found the discussion and the presentations from our guests useful and insightful. Remember to stay up to date with further advice from alumni and industry professionals. Subscribe to our Newcastle University Career Service YouTube channel, and you can follow us on our social media channels at NCL Careers on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. We hope to see you in September. Good luck and take care.